Hey everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri video series, and we're in 1935 today. So the first half of the previous 1935 speech did very well, lots of views, and the second half just tanked. I think it got 7 views, whereas I think, it's at least as interesting as the first one. So I never know what to make about things like that. I've never done really any research on the algorithm, so I don't know if that's the problem. But if any of you who are faithful viewers know anyone who might remotely be interested, please suggest the series to them. And you'll have to forgive me today for wearing this old rag with no buttons. I guess theoretically I could get some new buttons. Oh, there's one. Only one. But yeah, I just haven't done so. I only wear it around the house. Okay, so our recap for 1915, we had Dmitri in a contemplative mood, thinking about the future. When will the war be over? What will my life be like on this day next year? And we had this sort of interesting idea on his part that a Russian victory would usher in world peace, so to speak. I don't know if he was looking at it in that sort of, new paradise kind of sense. I don't think he was, but that would be the linchpin, I guess, to ending the war and bringing the peace that everybody, as of that moment, wanted so badly. Of course, that wasn't going to happen for a while, and it wasn't going to depend on a Russian victory, alas. In 1935, well, we had the conclusion of the speech of the 12th of June, lauding Russian achievements, even though they were Soviet achievements, and referring to Grand Duke Kirill in very messianic terms. Okay, our cast for today. We have Grand Duke Paul, Nicholas II, Aleksandr Kazanbek, who of course was the head of the Young Russia Party, and Kirill. And yeah, so there may be others. I don't think so, but if there are, then I am sorry I overlooked them. And we're actually going to do 2 little sections today, because the publication, this book of Dmitri's speeches was published by the Young Russia Party's own press. They had one at that time, and they didn't include every speech he ever made, but I think the major ones, and then some of the smaller ones, they would have just an excerpt from. So we start out with one of these excerpts that was spoken by Dmitri at Young Russia House in Paris. So they owned a house that was their headquarters. I don't know where it was, actually. And it was given on, it was said on 14th June 1935, so only 2 days after the previous speech, and it's just one little, it's like 2-3 sentences. Okay, so here we go with that. We've all been through a lot, exclamation point. I have more right than anyone else to say that. The Bolsheviks killed my father, cousin, our sovereign, and 16 of my closest relatives. But we don't have a spirit of revenge. We're turning to Russia with open arms. The Russian soul understands all and forgives all. Okay, very nice sentiments. Maybe that's not the most tactful way to put it. I have more right than anyone. But Dmitri is right, compared to the Vladimirovichi, who lost almost no one. Vladimir died, the patriarch of the family, in 1909, I believe, and the rest of the family, they all got out. So they were much less touched by the bloodiness of the revolution than any other of the branches of the family, I think. I guess the Nikolaevichi did all right as well. But yeah, so that's a true statement on Dmitri's part. Our sovereign, of course, being Nicholas II, 16 of my closest relatives. I did not count them. Might be interesting to do so. But he doesn't want revenge, and there's this reference to the Russian soul, which I find very interesting, because the Russian soul is a thing in itself within Russian history, culture, literature, and the arts. This idea of the Russian soul. It's kind of like, I spent a lot of time in Switzerland, a little time in France. I lived a long time in England, but still my firmest reference point is to my own country, which is the United States. So what would the equivalent be in the U.S. to the Russian soul? I guess the American spirit. You don't hear about the American soul, but you know, we've always had this idea of the American spirit and the can-do attitude and the, optimism. Let's go out and get things done. And in Russia, quite the opposite. Not this let's go out and get things done spirit sort of thing, but this kind of, and the Russians are kind of natural existentialists. So the Russian soul is, it's not optimistic, but it's, I'm not talking about what's going on in the world right now. I'm talking about the Russian conception of the Russian soul and how those of us looking at it from outside can try to interpret what is meant by that. So it's sort of long-suffering and existential. And I personally tie it most into what Dostoevsky said, although he did not invent it, about beauty will be the salvation of the world, and that Russia will be the salvation of the world because Russia is the soul, and will bring that sort of beauty and redemption to the world. So, it would have been so interesting to ask Dmitri how he would define that. And I have asked some Russians how they would define it, and I haven't really ever gotten a definition. It's more like, well, it just is what it is. But, even my modern secular Russian immigrant friends tend to say, yes, there is this great Russian soul. So, can you split that off from the sort of geopolitical reality, either with the U.S. or with Russia, as far as things they've done and are doing in the world, and say, yes, there still is a Russian soul, there still is an American spirit? I hope so, Anyway, maybe I will not go on to the next speech. I was going to do this little excerpt first and then do the first section of the next speech, or as it's called in the book, an address on the occasion of the party's feast day. It's undated, but Dmitri gives us some clues about when it occurred, probably September or October of 1935. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's talk a little bit. I mentioned before that I thought that Dmitri had actually written these speeches. Maybe I was a little too positive about that. They definitely were written with him, but I do see a bit of Cousin Beck's influence, particularly in this one, because even though we know that Dmitri had this strong poetic side, I think Cousin Beck was adding sort of some of the sentimental side of things, although, the Russian soul understands all and forgives all. I can conceive of Dmitri thinking that way, and that as his true belief, but I'm not sure he would have phrased it that way. On the other side, the whole thing about the Bolsheviks, and I have more right than anyone else. That is definitely him. So I would say overall, when things get a little more contentious, that's more likely to be Dmitri himself. You know, even if someone else said, oh, maybe you should take this out or put it a little differently, he's saying, no, this is what I'm going to say. So anyway, you know, I know you haven't heard a lot of these yet, but as we go along, I would love to hear your comments on where you think the balance is in these. You know, if you've been watching these videos all along, you certainly know how Dmitri expressed himself. And what you think in these is just directly him, his own words, and what you think has been more collaborative. Anyway, yeah, we might as well do a short one this time. So next time when we go back to 1915, we will have a pretty sedate day. The local priest coming to lunch, as he has a few times before. A new book, since Dmitri just absolutely devoured super consciousness. And another night walk. What is up with those? That's not something. This is the only time I remember in all of his writings that I've read where he does these night walks. So yeah, and then of course when we go back to 1935, we will be starting with this address on the occasion of the party's feast day. Russians love feast days. Every saint had a feast day, and, you know, name days and all that sort of thing. Every regiment had a feast day. So this is the party's feast day. Wonder when it was. And usually they're tied in with saints. So I don't know who the saint of the Young Russia Party was. But yeah, the next one does get a little contentious. So anyway, I hope to see you for both of those. Bye.